Recently, a game genre that has been around for a long time has suddenly gained popularity among young people. That game is World Er, released 10 years ago. Originally, it was a dating simulation game targeted at female players. However, in the end, the number of male players far exceeded expectations. What makes this game special is its diverse character system. It allows players to take on various roles, ranging from easy mode characters with high abilities to extremely difficult ones, completely useless individuals. Yet among them, there is one infamous trash-tier character known for his extreme difficulty and terrible traits. And one particular pervert has been playing this character for the past 10 years, Baek Yuseol. At this moment, in the real world, Baek Yuseol cracked his knuckles, his voice filled with excitement. "Let's get started, shall we?" He grinned gleefully at the computer screen, his fingers swiftly tapping the keyboard with absolute confidence. Because he was Baek Yuseol, the ultimate player. That afternoon, the golden hues of the sunset bathed the neighborhood. The atmosphere in the room was silent. Baek Yuseol took a sip of water with one hand, his sharp eyes catching something on his screen. A flood of offensive comments from other players filled the chat. "What the hell is wrong with this garbage game? I can't log in." Seeing this, Baek Yuseol muttered, "New posts on the forum. Is there an update or something?" More and more bewildered comments appeared. "What the hell is this stupid game? Where did that giant dinosaur ass come from? It just showed up and wiped out all my game data. What the hell is a Dark Abyss Dragon? It says my character is dead, and I can't log in anymore. What the hell is going on? My character got deleted." Baek Yuseol casually skimmed through the comments, his eyes showing a hint of surprise as he muttered to himself. "A final boss? In a dating sim? I thought the game ended when you successfully formed a relationship with a character." Just then, a particular post appeared on his screen, immediately catching his attention. "Everyone, this boss is absolutely unbeatable. This garbage Dark Abyss Dragon has 99% automatic magic resistance with 0 cooldown. It keeps attacking me non-stop with its magic absorption and whatever that weird magic conversion ability is. How the hell am I supposed to kill this thing? This has to be a bug." The moment Baek Yuseol finished reading, he suddenly yelled in shock. "Wait a minute, this guy is a famous rank climber." Instead of feeling anxious, Baek Yuseol found himself intrigued. He set his cup down and muttered skeptically, "A final boss?" Staring intently at the computer screen, he leaned on one hand, deep in thought, before speaking again. "It's absurd for a monster to have an ability that nullifies magic, in a world built on magic. This must be a serious bug in SAO." While the entire player base was panicking over their deleted characters, something suddenly appeared on Baek Yuseol's screen. A dragon, radiating pure malice. Seeing it, he could no longer dismiss the comments as exaggerations. "I guess it's true." Then, there it was, the final boss. The almighty Dark Abyss Dragon. At the same time, 13 members of Black Knight had also emerged. Baek Yuseol's fingers moved swiftly across the keyboard and mouse as he spoke. "So, the deeper you go into World Er, the more you uncover about this cult called Dark Phantom. Their goal is to help an alternate world, Human Gate, take over this one. And once they finally achieved that goal, the Dark Abyss Dragon appeared." Baek Yuseol stroked his chin, eyes still glued to the game interface as he muttered in suspicion. "Human Gate has already taken over 90% of the land? I've only cared about PvP. I never really paid attention to the storyline. But now that the whole narrative is spiraling out of control, is this even fine?" His expression grew increasingly serious. "It's not like I can just avoid fighting it. Maybe I should give it a shot." His hand moved slightly as he began scanning for every bit of information on the creature. A notification instantly popped up on the screen. "You are about to engage in battle with the Dark Abyss Dragon." Without hesitation, Baek Yuseol clicked yes, pressing his lips together. His face turned serious as his fingers clicked rapidly across the mouse. "I'll unleash every skill I've mastered over the past 10 years. On the screen, his character, Baek Yuseol, appeared, standing tall like a formidable warrior. In his hands, a razor-sharp light blade gleamed. And facing him, a massive Dark Abyss Dragon. Its colossal body was covered in razor-sharp black scales. Its eyes glowed with an eerie, mystical light, exuding an aura of dominance and terror. The atmosphere instantly became tense. The battle had begun. Baek Yuseol immersed himself in the game, his cold eyes locking onto the Dark Abyss Dragon. "If I had to introduce my character, Baek Yuseol." At this moment, He and his in-game character felt as if they had merged into one. He is the only character in the game who cannot use magic. Despite the fact that magic was available to everyone in this game. Not even the most experienced players chose to play him. With his frail physique and a decade of proven experience, one thing was clear: he was worse than even a background character. Baek Yuseol let out a sigh and continued. Of course, he can use a little bit of magic, but only one spell. Just then, the Dark Abyss dragon opened its massive jaws, gathering an ominous energy. In an instant, it unleashed a devastating blast of magic, aiming to obliterate him in the blink of an eye. Baek Yuseol hadn't anticipated this sudden attack. His eyes widened in shock. But then, a confident smile spread across his face. He was ready to face this monster head-on. Baek Yuseol leapt into the air, gripping his sword tightly. With a swift slash, he effortlessly cut across the dragon's neck. He described it as a well-executed blink strike. He landed quickly, still on guard, but something felt off. His expression darkened. This time, blink didn't seem to work as expected. Still in character as Baek Yuseol, he quickly analyzed the situation. The ability allows him to teleport randomly within a range of 3 to 10 meters. With 10 years of gaming experience, he had already learned an important lesson. The direction of the blink was completely random. If he couldn't control the exact landing point, he'd die instantly due to sheer speed and impact. That thought forced him into deep concentration. Even worse, the cooldown time and mana cost were ridiculous. How absurd. After using the skill, the character would be immobilized for 2 whole seconds, making him an easy target for any AI opponent. That was why most players avoided using it. But Baek Yuseol, confident in his mastery of the game, smirked. However, for a veteran player like me, Baek Yuseol had already mastered this skill. He could control the direction and distance of his blink. Not only that, he had learned how to negate the movement penalty. The details of his character were becoming clearer. Character: Baek Yuseol. Signature skill: blink. Status effect: mana deficiency. Baek Yuseol read through the stats, furrowing his brows in thought. It doesn't consume mana, because he doesn't even have a mana gauge in the first place. Unlike other magic skills, blink is merely a movement ability, nothing more, nothing less. Feeling a surge of excitement, he rapidly tapped the keys, thinking to himself, but that's exactly why I'm addicted to playing this character. Everything depends entirely on my own skill. Still fully immersed in the game, Baek Yuseol made his character leap high into the air, and delivered a critical slash at the Dark Abyss dragon. As he did, a realization struck him. For 10 years, I've been playing the only character in this game who can't use combat magic. But the Dark Abyss dragon wasn't about to go down easily. It retaliated, unleashing another powerful attack toward Baek Yuseol. Yet he showed no fear. With a swift motion, he raised his sword, blocking the incoming energy. The battle raged on, fierce and relentless. Finally, after a grueling fight, with 10 years' worth of honed skill and unwavering perseverance, the dragon fell at Baek Yuseol's feet. Standing tall, he gazed at his hard-earned victory. The once mighty dragon now lay motionless on the ground. Just then, a notification appeared on the screen. You have defeated the final boss, 13 Moons of the Black Knight. Back in the real world, Baek Yuseol sat in front of his monitor, his face frozen in shock. His eyes widened as he muttered in disbelief. What, I actually killed it? It took him a moment to process what had just happened. I mean, sure, I was fully equipped with ancient relic tier items from head to toe. But my character is still trash. Even as the shock settled in, his fingers instinctively danced across the keyboard. Well, whatever, a once-in-a-decade achievement like this, I have to show off to the community. However, his moment of triumph was short-lived. The instant he clicked his mouse, a series of ominous red notifications flooded his screen. Each one bore the same chilling message. An incorrect ending has occurred. 90% of World has been annihilated. Seeing this, Baek Yuseol's face went pale. What the hell? Before he could fully grasp what was happening, another red message appeared. However, you have come the closest to reaching the true ending. He sat there, stunned, unable to form a coherent sentence. But it wasn't over yet. Another blood-red notification popped up, right before Baek Yuseol's eyes. Please complete the true ending. This time, the message sent a wave of utter panic through Baek Yuseol, making him shout in disbelief. Staring at the notification, he suddenly felt his body being pulled into another dimension. He vanished from his room. Now, in an endless white void, his eyes widened in terror. For a moment, an eerie sensation washed over him. Then, Baek Yuseol woke up in an unfamiliar room. It looked nothing like his modern gaming setup. He lay motionless on the wooden floor. A wave of dizziness hit him all at once. Groaning, he pressed a hand to his forehead and sat up, muttering to himself, "What the hell just happened?" His hands trembled slightly as he surveyed his surroundings, trying to steady his breath. He was in a rundown house. Panic creeping in, he hesitantly spoke aloud. "Where am I?" His eyes darted around, scanning every detail of the dilapidated room. Then, in the corner, he spotted something crucial. His heart leapt as he gasped in relief. A mirror. Step by step, he cautiously approached the cracked mirror. But the moment his reflection became clear, his eyes widened in sheer shock. His pupils dilated as he stood frozen, staring at himself. Time seemed to stop, because in the mirror, his face was unmistakable. It was Baek Yuseol. His mind spiraled with frantic thoughts. This appearance, this is me, but just then, something strange flashed on the floor. Baek Yuseol, still in shock, took a hesitant step back. A screen materialized in front of him. A notification appeared. Chapter 1. Escape from the pursuit. The words on the screen sent a wave of disbelief through him. His mouth fell open as he muttered, "This is..." Slowly, he stood up. His mind no longer wavered. There was only one possible answer. This was the opening mission of Baek Yuseol. Everything, every moment, was unfolding exactly like a scripted event. A cold sweat ran down his forehead. No way. Then, as if recalling something crucial, Baek Yuseol hurriedly reached into his pocket. He pulled out something, and the moment he saw it, he froze in complete disbelief. Clutched in his hand was an acceptance letter. His fingers tightened around the paper as he read it. It was an official admission letter to Stella Academy. Beads of sweat rolled down his cheek. His throat felt tight, as if it refused to let out a sound. Because this was exactly like the game's storyline. Unbelievable. But Baek Yuseol's face darkened. He raised a hand to cover his expression, hiding the helplessness creeping onto his face. Yet, in his mind, one thought solidified. This is definitely the world of Angel. And I am Baek Yuseol. He pressed a hand to his forehead, taking a deep breath to steady himself. For a brief moment, silence filled his mind. Then, a bold decision took root in his heart. I need to stay rational about this. Just as he was deep in thought, something clicked in his memory. That voice, it told me to reach the true ending. With years of experience behind him, Baek Yuseol immediately realized, but from what I know, this game doesn't have a true ending. It only has multiple endings. Yet, in that instant, his mind suddenly worked at an unnatural speed. And then it hit him. Wait a second, could it be that? It didn't take long for Baek Yuseol to grasp the absurdity of the situation. His teeth clenched in frustration. A chilling thought formed in his head. No one has ever reached the true ending in 15 years. Based on the game's story, his instincts screamed that something was very wrong. He quickly moved toward the window. Recalling the game's opening scene, Baek Yuseol cautiously peeked through a narrow gap, his body tense. Outside, a blizzard raged, and in the storm, figures dressed in long cloaks, their faces hidden, scoured the area. A terrifying realization struck him. They're hunting me. The cloaked figures shouted chaotically, their voices barely audible through the howling wind. Where did that whore's son run off to? Baek Yuseol's breath hitched. He immediately held his breath and pressed himself into a corner of the room. Forcing himself to stay calm, he stole another glance outside. Then, he cursed under his breath. Damn it, they're here. Just then, the leader of the cloaked men suddenly froze in place. Something had caught his attention. Like a seasoned predator, his sharp gaze scanned the surroundings. Within seconds, he sensed Baek Yuseol's presence. Then, he shouted out to his men, "There's a house over there." Without hesitation, he pointed straight at Baek Yuseol's hiding spot. "Search it." His subordinates immediately responded in unison. Hearing their voices echo closer, Baek Yuseol pressed himself tightly against the door. His mind raced. What the hell do I do now? 10 years of gaming experience surged through his mind. Baek Yuseol's eyes sharpened. His brain worked at full capacity, trying to calculate his next move. I can't stay here for long. His fingers clenched into a tight fist. Frustration boiling within him. But I also can't fight them head on. Right now. His mind was running non-stop. Baek Yuseol had to think fast. What should I do? Once again, his racing thoughts were abruptly interrupted. That damn system notification popped up again. But this time, it delivered crucial information. You can now use the blink skill. Baek Yuseol read the message, his mind refusing to believe it. What? I can use blink? On the screen before him, the skill blink was now available. At that moment, his entire body began to radiate blinding light. Thoughts surged through his mind. With a body afflicted by magic leakage syndrome, a body that cannot condense mana, the only glimmer of hope I have is the one magic spell I've trained for endlessly, day and night. And now, right now, standing alone in the empty room, he stared at the notification glowing in front of him. You can now use the blink skill. Blink. 0 tier magic. Maximum range 9 meters. Mana cost, extremely high. Cooldown time 3 seconds. Baek Yuseol stared at the message, his expression tense with uncertainty. Is it telling me to use blink right now? But that's only when I control my character through a mouse and keyboard. Outside, the sound of hurried footsteps pounded through the snow. The mercenary leader and his men rushed toward the house where Baek Yuseol was hiding. The pounding footsteps grew louder, closer. A terrible sense of dread gripped him. His empty gaze flickered across the room. Then, his head snapped toward the window. Panic surged through him. His breath hitched. His body tensed. They were here. Shit. Baek Yuseol felt heat surge through his body. A paralyzing panic that rendered him speechless. His mind screamed, there's no time left. The situation was dire. He couldn't just stand here and die. At this point, there was only one option. He had to take the risk. Outside, the mercenary leader suddenly froze, his expression twisting in fury. They had spotted him. A voice shouted out, there he is, after him. As soon as they saw him, they charged, like a pack of hungry beasts. They pursued him. Don't let him escape. Stop right there. Baek Yuseol's heart pounded, though panic loomed over him. He forced himself to stay calm. He kept running, pushing forward. His mind worked furiously. The first part of the tutorial. Escape from pursuers using blink. Then, just ahead, a wide path opened up. He might have a chance. Baek Yuseol rushed toward the open path. But his mind was racing just as fast. Those pursuers are wearing enchanted boots. They're way faster than me. That meant, the only way to escape was by using blink. He was at a disadvantage. Though flustered by the idea of using magic, he forced himself to stay calm. Calm down. I've used blink thousands of times before. With 15 years of gaming experience, this skill was ingrained into his muscle memory. Behind him, the pursuers closed the distance. One of them shouted angrily, you little brat, you're really not gonna stop. Huh? Baek Yuseol glanced back, his sharp eyes narrowing in tension. They were catching up. As an experienced player, he knew blink's weaknesses well. If he miscalculated the distance and collided with an object, instant death. Before he could even fully plan his next move, the mercenary leader reached him. A massive blade swung toward him. I'll send you straight to hell. Die. For a split second, Baek Yuseol froze in terror. But then, he acted instinctively. In a flash, he activated blink. Just before the blade could cleave him in half, he vanished. Baek Yuseol reappeared several meters away, completely unharmed. His heart was still pounding. It took him a second to process what had happened. Then, a smug grin spread across his face. I actually pulled it off. The mercenaries stood there, stunned. One of them muttered in disbelief. What the hell was that? Was that blink? Is he a mage? Their leader's face contorted with rage. Why are you just standing there? After using blink, the caster is immobilized for 2 seconds. Now's the perfect time to. His words died mid-sentence. His expression twisted in horror. Because Baek Yuseol was still running. The realization hit him like a thunderbolt. Wait, why the hell can he still move? Baek Yuseol ignored the chaos behind him. He dashed into the forest, his mind racing. He needed a strategy. He couldn't let his guard down. Ahead, the path was full of sharp turns and obstacles. He thought to himself, I need to take advantage of this terrain. Because if a player doesn't learn how to control blink here, running frantically for a while had gradually drained his strength. He gasped for air, mouth open wide. But that thought still wouldn't stop. If he failed here, he wouldn't be able to proceed to the next stage. As he knew, in reality, 99% of players controlling Baek Yuseol couldn't clear this tutorial. Even among the 1% who managed to pass, none could overcome the wall. A barrier requiring absolute control over teleportation and constant repositioning. But fortune favors the bold. Once again, Baek Yuseol activated his only skill, BA2. With one final teleport, he landed successfully. His opponent was taken aback by his maneuver and exclaimed, "Teleporting through terrain like this? That brat is insane." Then, with a scowl, he growled in frustration, "Those capable of magic, move forward. Attack him from a distance." Following his command, the magic unit gathered, preparing to strike. Hearing this, Baek Yuseol turned toward them. His mind raced. What kind of spell were they about to cast? Before he could fully process it, they immediately launched their magic. A purple light engulfed the area. Baek Yuseol instinctively formulated a way to save himself. Phase 2 of the game tutorial. Use teleportation to dodge incoming magic arrows. His face showed clear signs of worry, even a hint of panic. Recalling the game mechanics, he thought, "I can see everything behind me, because it's displayed on the screen. That means I can dodge them in this critical moment." A system notification popped up. World of provides Baek Yuseol with critical information. Skill: Magic Leakage Syndrome is now active. Magic Leakage Syndrome triggers sixth sense and mental acceleration. His eyes widened. Gleaming blue streaks of light rushed toward him. Magic arrows, fired by the mercenaries, meant to end him in one strike. Baek Yuseol didn't stop moving. He continuously used his accumulated skills to evade the deadly arrows. But reality was crueler than he expected. At that moment, a magic arrow closed in dangerously fast, making his heart pound in fear. Without hesitation, he swiftly activated his ability. Teleport. A deafening explosion shook the battlefield. At last, he barely avoided a fatal strike. But the sheer force of the blast was beyond what he had anticipated. Baek Yuseol instinctively raised his arm to shield himself. By now, the dust had gradually settled, revealing an enormous crater left by the previous explosion. Seeing its overwhelming destructive power, Baek Yuseol finally regained his composure and thought, "That was close." But there was no time to stand around. He immediately took off running again, fleeing from their relentless pursuit. While running, he recalled the game's storyline and thought, "So, this is the final part." His stamina was wearing thin. Panting heavily, Baek Yuseol stared ahead. Before him lay a bottomless abyss. Just a few more steps forward, and he'd be granted a free ticket to the afterlife. According to what he remembered, this was phase 3 of the tutorial. Crossing the abyss using teleportation. This cliff, even if someone had wings, it'd be nearly impossible to cross. Let alone someone as weak as Baek Yuseol. But he had experienced this before while playing the game, and he had already learned from his mistakes. Standing at the edge, Baek Yuseol carefully contemplated, "The only way across is to control my teleportation distance with absolute precision." The next sequence of events slowly unfolded in his mind. After this, I'll encounter a few passing mages and escape. And that will mark the end of the tutorial. But that was in the game. Right now, he had to think things through carefully if he wanted to survive. "I need to cancel my teleportation spell exactly 0.1 seconds after activation, at the perfect moment. If I fail, even once, I'll die here." He stood in deep thought. Observing his surroundings, he spotted about 20 floating rocks scattered across the abyss. Looking at those massive boulders, his mind wavered. 0.1 seconds. Easier said than done. Baek Yuseol couldn't come up with a foolproof plan. So he clenched his fists tightly. Frustration boiling inside him. Who the hell designed this insane challenge? Despite his inner complaints, he had already formulated a strategy. However, for a veteran player like Baek Yuseol, there was one undeniable truth. Honestly, if I really had to do it, I probably could. Yet, as he stared down into the endless abyss, a new dilemma surfaced in his mind. The real problem was right in front of him. At that moment, the enemy forces had caught up to him. Pointing in his direction, they shouted, "There he is!" Baek Yuseol turned to them with a cold, unreadable expression. "They're closer than I thought." Analyzing their every movement, he calculated the distance between him and them, 100 meters. But his teleportation skill needed 3 seconds to recharge. Not enough time. Baek Yuseol relaxed his body, making his choice. It seemed the most viable method for survival was. With unwavering eyes, a bold and reckless thought emerged in his mind. Kill them all, under the desolate sky, amidst the raging snowstorm. and with a bottomless abyss before him. Baek Yuseol crouched behind a rocky outcrop, silently observing. Thoughts swirled in his mind. Even I think this is insane. How could I even consider something like this? I've never even fought in a real battle before. He cast a quiet glance toward the mercenaries still pursuing him. If this were a game, the system wouldn't allow me to attack my pursuers. But this was reality. As they steadily advanced toward him, Baek Yuseol made a firm realization. There's no rule saying I have to blindly follow the game's mechanics. With that, he gripped his dagger tightly, assuming a defensive stance. His mind continued racing. I don't mind killing an AI. Not because they're my parents' enemies. At least, according to the story. Suddenly, Baek Yuseol's gaze turned sharper than ever, fixing his eyes on the approaching enemies. He knew. They're here. I just think I can win. With the dagger hidden beneath his cloak, Baek Yuseol stepped forward, revealing himself. His sudden appearance caught them completely off guard. The leader's face contorted in fury. Clenching his teeth, he growled, "It's him." Without hesitation, he barked out an order. "Capture that brat, now." The mercenaries responded in unison. "Yes, sir." Weapons in hand, they charged straight at him, ready to finish the job. One of them sneered inwardly, thinking, does he really think he can take us all on alone? What an idiot. But Baek Yuseol remained unfazed. He met their arrogance with a chilling certainty. You're already dead. Standing before them, he felt no fear. Instead, he calmly calculated his next move. Target distance, 8.7 meters. Teleportation. The moment he vanished, the arrogant mercenary's smirk disappeared. He froze in place. Even the leader's eyes widened in shock, a flicker of fear appearing in his gaze as he watched Baek Yuseol. At that moment, Baek Yuseol teleported forward, launching a sudden attack. Without hesitation, he plunged his dagger straight into an enemy's stomach. Blood gushed from the man's mouth as he logged out of existence. The crimson stains on Baek Yuseol's face remained, a mark that could never be erased. Even though he had just taken a life, his expression didn't change in the slightest. If anything, his resolve hardened even more. Warm blood slowly dripped from the corpse onto his hand. For a brief moment, he reflected, I can feel the blood running down my fingers. But I don't feel guilty at all. Breaking out of his thoughts, he slashed across the enemy's neck once more. A clean, decisive strike. His mind remained steady. In the end, I'm only killing them to survive. Without hesitation, he yanked his dagger free, leaving the stunned mercenaries frozen in shock. Then, without missing a beat, he delivered a final, forceful kick, sending the dying man sprawling backward. The arrogant mercenary, now completely defenseless, collapsed lifelessly onto the ground. Seeing one of their own fall so easily, the leader's rage boiled over. His face contorted in fury, his bloodthirst barely contained, as if he was moments away from ripping Baek Yuseol apart. But Yuseol seized the opportunity. Without looking back, he turned and ran. Seeing him flee, the leader roared, "He's running, don't let him escape." Baek Yuseol sprinted for his life, the mercenaries hot on his heels. By any means, do not let him get away. The first phase was complete. As he ran at full speed, he thought, I took down one, but the next attack will be much harder. What should I do? A strange feeling crept over him. His instincts kicked in. Glancing over his shoulder, he suddenly realized, why is it so quiet? Did they give up? But surprise, surprise, out of nowhere, the mercenary leader emerged, blocking his path. Baek Yuseol skidded to a stop, his heart dropping. No, sweat drenched his forehead. He locked eyes with them, realizing with growing dread, are they about to use magic again? If all he did was dodge, his legs would eventually give out. This time, he couldn't just rely on running. Damn it, they had no intention of showing mercy. Without a moment's hesitation, the mercenaries unleashed their spells. The leader pointed at him and shouted, now. At that instant, one of his men cast a sinister magic spell. A massive blaze erupted, hurtling straight toward Baek Yuseol. The sheer intensity of it sent a wave of danger coursing through his body. His eyes widened in shock. Clenching his teeth, he frantically searched for a way to escape. The flaming projectiles shot toward him like arrows, locked onto him as their target, barreling forward like fighter jets. There was nothing he could do. All he could manage was to turn and run for his life. Even in his head, he cursed, damn it, what kind of insane magic is this? He was practically carrying his ancestors on his back. forced to flee at full speed. Up ahead, a tree grew out of a rock formation. The moment he saw it, he felt like a drowning man grasping a lifeline. Joy surged through him. There, that's it. No time to think. Baek Yuseol lunged forward, reaching out for the branch. But his strength wasn't enough. In that split second, he activated teleportation again. Just as he vanished, a deafening explosion erupted behind him, splitting the ground apart. A massive crater was left in its wake, thick smoke and dust rising into the air. The mercenary leader slowly approached, his lips curling into a satisfied smirk. He surveyed the destruction, certain of Baek Yuseol's demise. That should teach him a lesson, for his arrogance and foolishness. But, as he looked down, all he saw was an empty crater. His smug grin instantly vanished, replaced by pure confusion and fear. His eyes darted around frantically. Then, panic set in. He's not here, he shouted in alarm. But in truth, Baek Yuseol, dagger in hand, was already closing the distance. Only when he was dangerously close did the leader finally sense the murderous intent and snap his head around. Too late. As he stalked his prey, Baek Yuseol came to a realization. There was something unusual about teleportation. Clenching his jaw, he pushed himself forward and answered his own thoughts. Teleportation preserves momentum, both before and after activation. With this knowledge, Baek Yuseol shouted his skill name, then charged forward. His dagger pierced straight into a mercenary's stomach. A piercing scream echoed through the forest. The remaining mercenaries watched in horror. Their faces turned pale. One of them stammered, what the hell?" But before he could finish, Baek Yuseol, like a bolt of lightning, struck again. In a single swift motion, he took down another enemy. The mercenary leader was now drenched in sweat. Beads of cold fear rolled down his forehead. In mere seconds, his men had been slaughtered right before his eyes. And now, Baek Yuseol's body was completely drenched in their blood. After a few more strikes, exhaustion finally settled in. He took a deep breath. They started as a full mercenary squad. Now, only a handful remain. But even so, his battle-hardened spirit refused to waver. Baek Yuseol's mind remained sharp. Only 2 left. Baek Yuseol's determined gaze locked onto the remaining mercenaries. 2 left. I need to finish them off before the others catch up. The mercenary leader glared at him, his face a mixture of shock and suspicion. This guy, he's abnormal. His reaction speed is far beyond what a mage should be capable of. Raising his voice, he demanded, "Who the hell are you?" Hearing this, Baek Yuseol's cold, piercing eyes fixated on him. Inside, he thought, of course my reaction time is better than most pro gamers. But that only applies to games. He stood motionless, calculating his next move. I can't keep dodging forever, especially at this close range. With that thought, Baek Yuseol lunged forward like the wind. I'll end this fight as quickly as possible. Seeing him charge in, the mercenary leader grinned instead of retreating. He firmly gripped his blade and assumed a defensive stance. I've figured out your fighting style. In his mind, he arrogantly thought, this brat only relies on teleportation and daggers. As long as I protect my head and neck, he won't be able to kill me. Baek Yuseol rushed forward, a blur of motion. The leader braced himself, his weapon raised and ready. With an arrogant smirk, he barked, "Come on then, let's see what you've got." Then, in an instant, he cast his spell. A wave of ice erupted toward Baek Yuseol, aiming to freeze him in place. But Baek Yuseol felt no fear. He confidently activated teleportation. At the same time, the mercenary leader summoned massive ice pillars, his mind overflowing with certainty. Got him. Now, let's see the look of agony on his face. But then, his eyes widened in horror. His entire body stiffened. Something was wrong, because Baek Yuseol's real target wasn't him. It was the other mercenary standing beside him. Before he could react, Baek Yuseol had already eliminated the last grunt. The leader stood there, stunned. He had just witnessed the precision of Yuseol's blade up close. For a solid 5 seconds, he couldn't find the words to speak. Then, finally, his eyes bulged in utter disbelief. What the hell? A moment ago, you were running like a scared rat. Yet now, in contrast to his panic, Baek Yuseol stood there, eerily calm. He turned slightly toward the leader, his voice flat. A moment ago? Baek Yuseol let out a mocking smirk, his eyes glinting with a hint of disdain. Then, he spoke, "Thanks for helping me get better at this." His words struck a nerve. The leader's face twisted with rage. Through clenched teeth, he spat, "You little bastard. Don't mistake my patience for mercy." His anger had reached its peak. With a furious roar, he raised his sword high, his voice brimming with murderous intent. "This time, I'll kill you." But Baek Yuseol paid him no mind. Instead, he dug his feet into the ground and lunged forward. He launched a direct assault. But this time, he wasn't holding back. Both hands, two weapons. His eyes radiated pure killing intent. Without hesitation, he threw his spear straight at the enemy. At the same time, his mind raced. If I teleport now, I risk a counterattack. He'll throw that spear to make me defend my front, then strike me from another angle. Baek Yuseol had already anticipated this. I won't let him get what he wants. Meanwhile, the leader grinned smugly, thinking, good, I just have to strike the moment he gets close. But before he could react, Baek Yuseol had vanished from his sight. The leader's face drained of color. His eyes widened in horror. A few weak, trembling words slipped from his lips. No way. Only now did he realize something was terribly wrong. This wasn't how things were supposed to play out. Baek Yuseol hadn't fallen for his trap. Instead, he had plunged his dagger straight into the leader's heart. Only in that final moment did the leader understand. From the very beginning, he was always planning to attack me head-on. And just like that, the battle was over. And with it, Episode 1 had come to an end. Notification. You have gained experience. Bonus rewards granted. Reason. You are the only one progressing this storyline under the Celestial Project. At that moment, Baek Yuseol sat slumped against a rocky wall, his body covered in wounds. His breath was ragged, labored. With trembling hands, he reached for his dagger. Then suddenly, he froze, staring at his blood-stained hands. His mind went blank. Baek Yuseol could hardly believe his own eyes. A single thought surfaced. That's right, this isn't a dream. Without thinking, Baek Yuseol collapsed onto the ground. Scenes of bloodshed flashed through his mind. He couldn't help but reflect on everything. His first teleportation, his first battle, his first kill. Baek Yuseol found himself trapped in silence, his own thoughts weighing him down. I killed someone to survive. But he quickly pushed the thought aside. He stood up, brushing off the dirt and blood clinging to his clothes. After a long pause, he sighed. I need to get out of here. Just as he was about to leave, he suddenly stopped, as if remembering something. Baek Yuseol turned back and muttered, "Wait a second?" His brows furrowed. He stared intently at the corpses, lost in thought. Then, as if coming to a decision, he hurried over and began searching the bodies. As he rifled through their belongings, he thought, this might be a bit immoral. But I need to be practical, I don't have any money. After a while, luck finally smiled on him. He found a bag of gold coins. His heart leapt with joy. Got it. He quickly checked the contents. Let's see, this is about 2.000.0001. Better than nothing. But his joy was short-lived. With the gold in hand, another problem arose. The cliff ahead was covered in thick, icy snow. And beyond it, a bottomless abyss waited for his next step. Dragging his tired feet through the frozen ground, Baek Yuseol found himself standing at the edge of life and death. I have to cross this cliff. As he was deep in thought, a voice suddenly called out from the distance. Is anyone there? The unexpected sound caught his attention. On the other side of the abyss, a group of people stood, shouting in his direction. Upon seeing them, Baek Yuseol narrowed his eyes. That must be the group of mages from the tutorial. Seizing the opportunity, Baek Yuseol raised his hand high and shouted back, I'm here. A voice from the other side responded. There's no bridge nearby. Can you cross on your own? We're on our way. Among the strangers, one man turned to his companions and reported. Hold on, he says he can make it across. A voice, presumably Kai's, questioned, but to cross this cliff, he'd have to be at least a rank B knight. Can that kid really do it? The first man hesitated before replying. I'm not sure. Suddenly, the boy stopped mid-conversation, his eyes widening in shock. Everyone around him let out a unified gasp of surprise. Before their eyes, in the blink of an eye, Baek Yuseol was leaping effortlessly across the floating rock formations. The two observers watched with unblinking intensity. Baek Yuseol calmly used teleportation, jumping from one rock to the next with precise control. One of them murmured in disbelief. What kind of movement technique is that? Is that some kind of jump spell? Another voice immediately responded. That's teleportation. At that moment, Iso Moon stood silently, his gaze fixed on every movement Baek Yuseol made. The red-haired student spoke up again, still skeptical. Teleportation? But teleportation shouldn't allow for such precise control over distance and direction. Yet, as they watched, Baek Yuseol perfectly calculated each teleportation step. Still unconvinced, the red-haired student muttered, How is he doing that? But then, his jaw suddenly dropped in shock. He had spotted something trailing behind Baek Yuseol. His voice trembled as he asked, Who are those two? Are they with him? Before he could process the situation, his expression twisted in fear. On the far side of the abyss, several mercenary mages still remained. One of them, his face twisted with murderous intent, was silently preparing a dark magic spell. A moment later, a black projectile shot forward, aimed directly at Baek Yuseol. The group on the other side cried out in alarm. Hey, watch out! Hearing the warning, Baek Yuseol immediately turned around, his mind erupting in curses. Damn it, if he wanted to stay alive, he couldn't afford even a second of hesitation. With split-second reflexes, he teleported away, narrowly avoiding death. Barely catching his breath, Baek Yuseol turned back to assess the situation. What he saw, a massive crater, like a gaping volcano, left in the wake of the explosion. With just a glance, he immediately recognized the culprits. The same mercenary bastards from before. This is bad. Baek Yuseol quickly found a stable footing, his mind racing. Teleportation needs another 3 seconds to recharge. Dodging every spell is impossible. He turned to scan his surroundings, calculating his next move. I need to find another floating rock to land on. But before he could react, his eyes went wide in fear. Another hidden mage had been waiting for the perfect moment. The enemy had used his distraction to launch a sneak attack. But thankfully, Baek Yuseol's heightened senses kicked in just in time. Detecting the incoming danger, he dodged at the last possible moment, escaping death once again. As the surge of power merely brushed past him, it was already enough to make him lose a few precious strands of hair. But it didn't stop there. The impact of the magic was too immense. The force was so overwhelming that the rock beneath his feet couldn't withstand it and shattered apart. Too sudden, he couldn't react in time and simply plummeted down. Yet, in his mind, he was still fully aware. I'm falling. However, the aura of the protagonist wasn't going to let him die so easily. In just an instant, Baek Yuseol twisted his body midair and swiftly scanned his surroundings. Damn it, he cursed internally. The distance was too far. All the floating rocks were out of his reach. But now, there was no other choice. Baek Yuseol began to release his power, making a desperate gamble in hopes of landing somewhere safely. When he was only centimeters away from the rock ledge, he immediately activated blink technique. His wounded hands, filled with cuts and bruises, finally managed to grab onto the cliff's edge. Dangling midair, he couldn't help but let out a relieved thought, I'm alive. But before he could even catch his breath, a fiery surge of power erupted from below, racing towards him with the intent to burn him alive. At this moment, his mind was still trying to process the situation, or maybe there was no need to anymore. That fire was shooting up like a missile, far too fast to escape. In that split second, Baek Yuseol had already accepted the 99% chance of his own death. I'm going to die. Just as he was staring death in the face, a sudden flash of blue power surged from nowhere. Boom! That mystical blue force effortlessly obliterated the terrifying dark magic from the enemy mages. After the intended collision, all that remained was dust and mysterious emerald-like stones scattered around. Baek Yuseol still clung tightly to the rock, but his eyes were filled with doubt. What kind of magic is this? He pondered. An ice spear wrapped in lightning? Who could possibly merge two elements into a single attack like this? His eyes widened further at the realization. Not only that, but they also calculated the perfect shooting trajectory, without wasting any mana. Who could execute such a flawless attack? At that very moment, all the mages below turned their gazes toward Iseman, because she was the one who had cast the spell. She had countered the mercenary mage's dark magic, and saved his life. At that moment, the two mages, having witnessed their formation being completely shattered, were not only shocked but also filled with a hint of fear. Impossible. They quickly sensed the growing danger and, without hesitation, turned around and fled. Baek Yuseol watched as they ran for their lives, their legs moving as fast as they could. Letting out a sigh of relief, He still clung tightly to the rock, inwardly thinking, looks like I'm alive after all. After a while, he finally managed to cross to the other side of the abyss. Now standing on solid ground, he turned his attention to the group of mages. The moment he glanced over, Baek Yuseol immediately recognized the one who had saved his life. Without wasting a second, he hurried over and took the initiative to speak to her. Thank you for saving me just now. However, Iseman didn't even spare him a glance. She simply replied in a cold voice. I didn't do it to receive any gratitude. So don't bother. Baek Yuseol awkwardly scratched the back of his head. Alright then. Yet, despite her cold demeanor, he couldn't help but be drawn to her mysterious aura. She has the most captivating voice I've ever heard, but she seems so distant. Still, he quickly regained his indifferent expression. Whatever. At that moment, Baek Yuseol recalled the upcoming events in the game's storyline. Although those mages were nothing more than bandits who looted and terrorized villages. The truth, based on the knowledge he had gathered, was that most of these criminal activities were orchestrated by the dark magic cult. But in any case, it was all over now. The moment he crossed this cliff, he had officially stepped into the territory of the mages. The cultists would no longer be chasing after him. Baek Yuseol let out a long sigh. Gazing into the distance, a strange excitement flickered in his heart. Besides, they don't even know who I am. Just then, a system notification popped up before him. World of has sent you a new update. Chapter 2. Enrollment at Stella Academy. Reading through the message, Baek Yuseol confidently muttered. Chapter 2. Sounds easy enough. But the moment his eyes locked onto the words Stella Academy, his entire body froze. His face paled. His vision blurred slightly. Wait, I have to go to school? At my age? Under the silent night sky, the carriage carrying the group of mages continued its journey. The coachman remained silent, guiding the horses steadily through the darkness. Inside the carriage, exhaustion finally caught up to Baek Yuseol. Without realizing it, he drifted off into a deep sleep. At that moment, childhood memories surged through his mind. The image of a young Baek Yuseol, just a small, adorable boy with big, round eyes, came into view. He was tugging at the blanket, calling for his mother. His mother, frail and thin, smiled warmly upon hearing his words. When I grow up, I'll become a mage. Her voice, filled with tenderness, echoed softly. All right, my dear, I believe you can do it. Baek Yuseol, holding an old book in his small hands, read diligently while thinking to himself. Mom and Dad worked so hard. They saved up to buy me this old magic tome. Even as a child, he had already made up his mind. I have to study hard. I can't let them down. And so, little Baek Yuseol devoted himself to learning magic. His mother, always watching over him, would lovingly tuck him in whenever he fell asleep while studying. But life was never fair. His dreams shattered completely the day his mother, in a panic, repeatedly called for the doctor. She held Baek Yuseol tightly in her arms, unwilling to believe the words spoken by the physician. Your son has mana leakage syndrome. Hearing that, young Baek Yuseol was overcome with fear and denial. No way. At that moment, his past and present blurred together, as if he had fully merged with the character in the game. Why were these memories rushing back so vividly? Baek Yuseol couldn't distinguish reality from illusion anymore. He questioned himself, or was it that the image of his younger self, sobbing uncontrollably, had surfaced once again? The sight of that crying child jolted him awake. His head throbbed violently, feeling as if it would split open. Dazed, he glanced at the sunlight streaming into his face and muttered to himself. It's morning already. The red-haired man sitting across from him spoke up. Oh, you're awake? I was just about to wake you. Then, in a casual tone, he added, we'll be arriving at La Joicha, the satellite city of Acnium, soon. After some time, the carriage continued its journey before the lead rider called out.